I think one of the things that I learned from the first business is like businesses aren't your baby. Businesses are vehicles to achieve whatever personal goals that you're trying to achieve.
Welcome to the Measure Success podcast, where we talk with top leaders about effective strategies that inspire success. Very excited to have with us today Ryan Harbor, the CEO of Talent Harbor. He's also the founder of this business. It's a modern talent and recruiting firm focused on helping growth-minded companies attract, assess, and retain high-impact leaders and operators. But Ryan's not your average, ordinary entrepreneur. He is actually a reservist in the Navy. He has built amazing companies that have had incredible growth successes. And he's also had the bankruptcy side of it as well. And so, Ryan, I really look forward to talk about your story here today. Welcome to Measure Podcast.
Awesome. Thanks for having me, Carl. Excited to be here.
So, Ryan, I always like to capture people's attention with like the oh crap story or amazing story. And what's interesting with you when you were describing it earlier, when in the kind of the pre-talk, you were like, "Hey, Carl, I was getting ready to move forward and go from enlisted, becoming commissioned, and becoming a naval aviator, to all of a sudden transition where that didn't work, and then your company went bankrupt all at the same time. Basically, sounds like same timing.
Yeah.
Describe a little bit more. What the heck happened?
Yeah, that was 2013, which might just be the worst year of my life, but a necessary year of my life because when I think of things that I've accomplished or failures, it's like everything kind of builds on top of itself. So like I needed those lessons learned in order to get where I am today. And 2013 really started in 2012 when demand started to subside for an event company that we had. So we launched this event called Run for Your Lives. And Run for Your Lives was the first ever zombie infested 5K obstacle course race. So if you think back to the days of like Tough Mudder and Warrior Dash and Spartan Race, we were actually number 3. We beat out Spartan Race with 121,000 participants in 2012.
Wow.
But what we learned very quick is it wasn't sticky, meaning that people would go back to Tough Mudder and Spartan Race, but they were there for a specific reason. For us, like how many times do you really want to run away from zombies, put on a flag football belt? We had 250 zombies chasing you on the course. And we learned a very tough lesson there. And towards the tail end of 2012, demand started to wane. And then 2013, just ticket sales, we had doubled the events. We went from 13 events to 26 events, and our sales were half. And some mistakes that I made was, number one, I couldn't spell P&L, and so I had no idea how money was coming in the business, where it was going. We were just operating the business off the bank account. Well, in the event space, you're operating off of deferred revenue, meaning that you're collecting all the ticket sales up front, and then you're investing in the events to execute them later on. And you cannot manage an event company like that off the bank account. And so when like our first event, we invested $1,000,001 into putting on the event, and we only collected 740 some $1,000 in ticket sales. So a lot of tough lessons learned. And we were like, we can just grow through it. We'll grow out of this once we start to understand. We couldn't. And like literally one day, just trucks came to a stop. And that unfortunately led to not just a company bankruptcy, but I didn't know anything. It was my first company that scaled. It went from 0 to 5 million over like 24 months. And so I PG'd everything. Every contract, vendor contract, yeah, sure, just tell me where to sign. And so it took me with it. And when people called, this was September, October 2013, it was like, oh, I'm sorry. I heard about what happened. And what folks don't understand is like, once a bankruptcy is executed, like that's actually the piece, meaning that the 12 to 18 months leading up to a bankruptcy is the stress, because you're trying to save the company. And so you're talking to 20 vendors a day, you're begging them to keep the trucks on the road. And that stress ultimately led to having a conversation with a naval doctor, talked about the stress, the anxiety, everything. And she was like, well, this has to go away before you can clear this. I was like, okay, yeah, that makes sense. So, that was the extent of it. Later that year, when I went for my pre-commissioning flight physical, they said, nope, not with a history of anxiety. So lost everything in 2013, the dream of flying jets off aircraft carriers. And then also, my business.
I pause because in business, um, there's a lot of failures. We all know this. I mean, like it's hard to run a business. We make it sound like it's easy often in this show, but it's not. It's amazing how much it's so hard to get. Never mind, to get a business off the ground to make it last for 5 years, right? These are really difficult things. Many times, a business closure is a walk away, for lack of a better term. You know what I mean? It's just like not too painful, but painful, more of an ego type blow. But when you get in your situation where, and I've had to work with companies who've gone through this, where they get to that bankruptcy stage, you're right. The stress of leading up to it is so painful. I mean, it's so
Yeah.
painful because, as much as we like to think of things as companies, there's somebody on the other line that's expecting to get money that, you know, you had all the right intentions, right, to do what you were doing, but things didn't work out. And the stress along to that, and then the part. So how did you how did you get over that? I mean, obviously it's a part of your life, it's part of your story, but how did you, work through that from a mental perspective to go, because you didn't just clarify people who listen to this podcast. There's a reason why he's on the podcast, and it's not just about the bankruptcy. You've had some
Yeah.
incredible success. Um, how did you overcome that?
Yeah, a couple ways. Like two stand out for me quite a bit. So uh, I guess the other component to this that like just completely destroyed me is it wasn't just vendor money.
Mm,
And like I think when businesses are dealing with other businesses, like they're accepting a certain amount of risk, and it still does not feel good. It still impacts livelihoods, but there's risk kind of going both ways when it's B2B. One thing that like really tore me up in this is we had sold 18,000 tickets for the rest of the year, and we're supposed to put on like six more events, and like we literally just disappeared.
wow.
And it was one of those things where like the public doesn't know, they're not looking at your P&L. And so like the death threats, the people that like got my phone number, the people that got my address, like these are 15, 20,000 people that are incredibly pissed off that they spent $100 and now this company's, and they make up own stories too, like, oh, the founders ran off the Tahiti with the money. Like, no, I just went personally bankrupt. Check the court records in the city of Baltimore. And so when I think about like what really kind of pulled me out of that moment, number one, and some of the stuff's just going to like, some of it's going to be like aha, and then the other is going to be uh, hopefully helpful. Number one, the gym. And so I think a lot of people understand that there's a certain outlet, that the gym and exercising and getting into shape. And I was certainly out of shape because 12 months I was just running around dealing with company issues, in addition to going to school while still being active duty Navy. Um, but the thing that really helped me out was I started writing, and writing has been like such a critical part of my life ever since. So at that point, I just wanted to write like what happened and get it out into the public. Our fans weren't, well, they weren't fans at that point, but like our previous customers weren't reading my LinkedIn blog post. But people that knew me were reading it, and hopefully they were kind of seeing the other side of the story, and hopefully maybe they were even learning something. And I've carried that with me. I'm not much of a blog writer anymore, but every morning I wake up, I write 3 pages, and like it doesn't matter what it is, and I can barely even read it. I can barely understand what it is that was even going through my head, but it just completely resets all that brain trash, gets it out in the morning, and then I'm clear for the rest of the day. So writing has been kind of monumental for me.
Thank you for going through that. I appreciate you kind of describing a little bit more. You do three pages worth, right? Because that's like a bit of a commitment to going towards there. And I appreciate. It's funny. I write blogs and podcasts, and yeah, not I shouldn't write podcasts, but I write content regularly. But I don't necessarily do what you do, which is like the self writing, right? And that's a powerful piece. And whenever I do it, I feel good about it. Interestingly enough, it's usually a positive type experience, but it's not doing that. So it's really interesting that had that helped get you through it. All right, so we're going to switch to the positive side. You went from prior to Talent Harbor, you went from growing one of the fastest growth companies there was, has been, and had a successful exit. What was that business, and how did you make that happen? And then a third thing is, what lessons did you learn from your previous experience to help you be successful with this last one?
Yeah. I like to say it was like an easy jump. It was like, oh, I just knew immediately. We went right from that to this. And that wasn't the case. I was dabbling in other companies. I launched a SaaS platform that just did not work at all. And as a part of my writing, like I was doing a lot of stuff on Reddit at the time. I'm not much on Reddit anymore, but back then I lived in the entrepreneurs channel because I felt like I had real experiences that would help other people. And I developed actually some pretty meaningful relationships from Reddit. And this guy came down to San Diego. That's where I was stationed at the time. And he was like, he knew I was working on this software, and he was like, "What the heck are you doing? Like, you have no business in software. Your whole background is like consumer product, and you have this network, and you've got this expertise in like how to get an event off the ground. Why don't you go try that again?" And literally that day, my co-founder in Run for Your Lives was Derek Smith, a childhood friend. Him and I have known each other since first grade. And I called him and I was like, "Derek, I'm going to do this again. Do you want to join forces?" And he was like, "Let's do it." So 3 years after, so 2013 was the bankruptcy. 2016, we developed a concept for the next event. And that event was called Hunt a Killer. And what we did, we used the same methodology. So back in 2010, we were looking at like up and coming themes and genres and trying to get ahead of that. And that was The Walking Dead. So we actually were running commercials on The Walking Dead.
No kidding.
Yeah. And like some really cool tactical stuff, meaning like we were shooting our commercials in a way, because that was all about like the TiVo days where people would just fast forward through. So we would shoot our commercials in a way in which it looked like the episode was coming back on. So we knew we would get them to stop. And then we hit them over the head with like, it was a real life experience.
Oh, interesting.
But with Hunt a Killer, we used the same methodology. And what we learned in 2016 is that these podcasts, My Favorite Murder, Sword and Scale, these podcasts were popping up Serial everywhere and creating these micro communities of like armchair detectives. Like they were so interested in learning more about solving crimes and things like that. And so we said, great, this event will be like part murder mystery, part escape room, part immersive theater, and let's see what it does. So we spent about a year developing it, sold tickets, and it went great. It was a fantastic experience, but the problem is it didn't scale. And so when we had a Run for Your Lives event, we could put 15, I think San Diego or SoCal event had like 18,000 people that did it in a weekend. Well, Hunt a Killer, we could only have 600 people. And the reason for that is you can't have 1,000 people standing around this fake crime scene and trying to interrogate suspects and things like that. And so we found product market fit, which in my incredibly humble opinion is the hardest thing to do in entrepreneurship and in any sort of startup. But we didn't have the right business model. So we looked across the industry, and what we found is Loot Crate, Birchbox, all these subscription box companies that were just popping up, incredibly successful. And so we said, that's it. So we're gonna take this experience that we created, we're going to put it in a box, and we're going to deliver it episodically to doorsteps each month. And that was the pivot. So it was 2 weeks after that first event. We said, this isn't going to work. We made like 60 grand from that first event. You take all the expenses out, I think we had 5 grand left over. It's like, we can't retire off of 2,500 a year. And we pivoted into the subscription box. At that point, the rest was really history. So that company or that subscription box went from 0 to about 48 million. We got the attention from Target, Walmart, Barnes and Noble. So we put together a non-episodic experience that could sit nicely on store shelves. So we got into retail distribution in 2020. Grew and scaled 0 to 55 in 6 years, and then wound up selling it almost exactly 2 years ago now.
Wow, good for you. Good for you. So, and are you out of that business now? Did you walk away? Are you still involved with it? How's that part?
Yeah, I think one of the things that I learned from the first business is like businesses aren't your baby. businesses are vehicles to achieve whatever personal goals that you're trying to achieve. And so there was never, not a single ounce of attachment. And there hasn't been ever since. Anything that I've touched or anything that I've started, I have no emotional attachment to it. And so, like, the transaction occurred, I think it was January 26th of 2024. And January 27th I was also at the Naval War College. That's a whole nother story. But January 27th, I woke up the next day and that was it. And I haven't thought about it since.
Good for you, because that's not common. It's what you described there is a super fascinating thing of honestly trips up a lot of business owners, right? Is that their ego, who they are, their experiences is the identity of the business.
Yeah.
And good for you to clarify that difference, right? That it is a vehicle. And it's interesting. I when I'm coaching business owners about which strategic path to take, right? Are you trying to build a business to exit? Are you trying to create an oil well, right? Are you trying to maximize the exit? But what the really important thing that's not left said there is, regardless of the entity itself, is are you going to regret that decision if you sell it?
Yeah.
Right. Because if your whole alter ego is tied up in being a CEO of a particular business and the employees, somebody said something really good the other day is like, when you have your lake cabin home, is a private equity investor. He said his whole goal is when you have your lake cabin home, you're there not with regret. Right.
Yeah. Yep.
It's really interesting. I don't know if this is kind of going a little bit too modern here. I guess fair. The Beast Games. I don't know if you. Well, I don't watch a
Yeah.
whole lot of TV, but that's one that's fascinating because it's so fascinating, the concept of money and what people think is fair and what people think that's not fair. And it's fascinating how when people will take money, they'll feel guilt.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I, I, I don't know if this is a tangent alert. However, like, I've watched some of the Beast Games where like the counter's going up and they're trying not to let down their teams. Like, I I don't know how strong of a relationship you can build with someone over like a few weeks, but I cannot imagine that it's strong enough where you don't push a button when it says $1 million on the board and all of those people go away and you keep the million. Like, there's some really interesting things at play there.
Fascinating. It's fascinating. Like the guy who took the 650,000 like in the one deal, and he came back to the second show. This is weird. I did not expect this podcast to go to. Here we are. And he feels this incredible amount of guilt. It's like, folks, the purpose of this game is to get $5 million. And you're one of only 200 people to get an opportunity at that. If you can get 100,000, 200,000, 500,000, that's more than zero. But there are people there in that game are like, that's wrong. If you're not doing it with integrity, their perceived value of integrity, right?
Yep.
Then all of a sudden, like, they fear you're doing the wrong thing. I just, because this is the horror story of businesses. There was a gentleman I read about who sold a business for 50 mil. He got the majority of it, and he committed suicide the next day.
Yep.
Like, that's unacceptable, right? Like, it's like, it can't be about that. We got to make sure we've got our head on straight beforehand, before the after, so to speak, or at least figure out it's more than that. But I think that's super fascinating stuff. So, all right, you sold that.
Mm-hmm.
Good for you for getting through the work. Did you all the way through the work college? Did you get through that experience, by the way? You kind of like dabbled
I
out.
did.
And by the way, for the civvies out there, like the majority of us, what the heck is the work college for those who don't know what that means?
Yeah. And there's a couple interesting stories. So for the last year of the company, like right up until the 9 months that we went through the sale process, I was actually deployed. So I got a tap on the shoulder from the Navy and they were like, hey, you're heading out. And I deployed for 10 months. And I was all over Africa. I was all over Europe and I was on a USNS. So when you were talking about your family and the merchant side of it, I was stationed on that ship. There was that, and then there was the Naval War College. And so the Naval War College, it serves a multitude of purposes, but I would say the core purpose is a postgraduate level education for naval officers. They do a whole bunch of different stuff, and it's incredible. But I was going through a postgraduate studies for 10 months. 10 months means it's accelerated. So you're reading 600 pages a week. But yes, ultimately, I don't know how, but ultimately graduated from the War College.
Good for you. Good for you. Okay. So we're going to keep transitioning because this is, I mean, you could be like a multi-podcast guest just with all your things if we dove in a bit deeper. But I do want to talk about your current company, Talent Harbor. So here is, if you may, you've actually already mentioned multiple different companies you've been involved with. Why this current company? What did you seen as the opportunity? Why did you now build the, why have you created this company?
Yeah, and some of this gets back to the lessons learned from the first bankruptcy. Like one of the biggest lessons learned is you got to have the right people. You can accomplish anything in business if you have the right people around the table focused on the right problems. That's hands down. And my passion has never come from the business. This is one of the reasons I think I've been able to disassociate. Like I don't have the expertise for the things that we've ever executed. Therefore, like I was disassociated from the actual delivery of that product or service.
Uh-huh.
A couple other things. One, peer groups. So, I joined Vistage as soon as I launched Hunt to Killer, and it got some sort of traction, some sort of operating system. We use EOS, the entrepreneurial operating system, and then a business coach. When we were going through hyperscale at Hunt to Killer, we got to a place that we didn't get to with the last company. And that place was being able to afford expert recruiting. How we had recruited was ZipRecruiter. And so we copied it from someone's job posting that looked similar. And then we pasted it into our template, and then we posted the same thing.
Mhm.
And it wasn't until I was able to use an expert recruiter where I was like, oh, this is game changing. Like this is a whole nother level. This is a competency, and it's just been inaccessible. And so there was a couple issues that I saw. Number one, there is zero trust in the recruiting space. Recruiters are looked at like used car salesmen. And what CarMax did about 30, 40 years ago was they said, no haggle, transparent pricing, 101 point inspection. What they were trying to do was change the entire industry. And so number one, like the recruiting industry has a reputation and a perception problem. And so to me, that spoke to the opportunity. Number two is if small businesses can't afford to go use a recruiter that's charging $30, $40, $50,000 to go hire a single human, then like what a lost opportunity for maybe brilliant ideas or a brilliant business where they can't find, because they don't know where to find the right talent. And so anyhow, long-winded, like, and it's a gigantic industry. So it's like those three things together, I was like, what a massive opportunity to come in and think differently and disrupt this industry. So I'm not an expert recruiter. I'm not an expert game designer. So the first person I called was the best recruiter that we ever used at Hunt to Killer. Her name's Alana Burr, and just a wonderful, incredible human being. And I was like, I'm going to start a recruiting agency. And so she had just sold hers maybe 4 years prior. That company had sold. She was post earnout and everything else. And she was like, say no more. Let's go do this. So we took 25 years of recruiting experience out of her head, developed a proven process, operationalized it, and then we changed the business model. So we took some pages from Hunt to Killer where it was a subscription, and we said, we're going to do subscription-based recruiting, and that's going to make it accessible for small, medium-sized businesses. And what's interesting is like half of the recruiting industry is about a $28 billion market, and half of that market is small to medium-sized businesses. And just thinking of like them writing $30,000 to $50,000 checks just to be able to bolt that competency on just made no sense. So here we are, a year-ish later, and just cranking.
So there's a lot of different type of talent, right, that you could be recruiting for. Are you focused on certain functional skill sets, or where is that? Where do you spend most of your time today in terms of recruiting talent?
Yeah, we like pain. We like to go after like the absolute hardest, and so we specialize in sales roles.
Well, okay.
Sales is hands down the hardest thing to recruit for. Number one, it's a sales process. And so like we have to reach out to people that are not proactively seeking employment because generally speaking, like the rock stars are too busy selling to be on job boards posting their resume. So active outreach to passive candidates. And then once you get them past that stage, like almost all salespeople are energetic, they're outgoing. And so you've got to be able to cut through the, hey, they can sell themselves versus, hey, they can actually sell whatever service or product that is our client. And so that's been our specialty for the last year. It's been going incredibly well. There's a whole bunch of like marketing aspects to that as well. But yeah, that's what we focus on, sales roles.
That's that's awesome. It's awesome that, and that is it is truly a hard thing. And I don't want to make presumptions here because you're doing this now. Why is it so hard to find a quality salesperson?
Yeah, a couple things like, and it goes back to that sales process. Like our whole motto internally, we don't really publicize this, but like our war cry internally is we hunt hunters. And
Mm, mhm.
when you think about recruiting through this the lens of a sales process, that means that we need to be putting together our own materials that are going to sell the company because it's a two-way street when it comes to salespeople. A salesperson making $1 million a year at this software company, like you better have your crap together to convince them to leave that behind and come join your team. And so it's this kind of mutual balance that we've got to find throughout the process. But it starts with like we have to be prepared to sell them on behalf of our clients.
Huh.
And I think where companies get lost nowadays is like they post to Indeed, they post to LinkedIn, they post to ZipRecruiter, and they're going through hundreds, if not thousands, of resumes because everything's AI now. So you've got AI on behalf of the candidates. So AI's out there just auto applying to thousands of roles that it thinks you fit. And then, companies and other things have like AI. So you got AI and AI. That's not recruiting. Recruiting is understanding exactly what it is you need and then going and finding that individual. Because most likely that individual is not going to find you.
Right, right. So you said something really interesting, and I'm really familiar with it. And I think it's the second most important person in the company is a great hunter.
Mhm.
What and so, but why don't you describe from your perspective what is a sales hunter
Yeah,
versus the
there's
alternative,
yeah,
if that makes sense.
yeah. There are various types of salespeople, and so when we talk about hunters, even from a hunting standpoint, there has to be a lot of specifics as far as like who were they going to hunt, what systems, what processes are in place in order for them to hunt. Because sometimes, and the insurance world, I was just talking to somebody yesterday about this, is like notorious for this. Like some hunters just have to be able to pick up a phone, dial 100 numbers each day, and figure out how to negotiate just to get to a booked call. And so, like, you have to overcome all those objections, which, by the way, whoever's on the other end of that line is probably very pissed off because the first thing they're thinking is, how did this other person get my cell phone number? But like that's one type of hunter. There's other types of hunters where like maybe they have an existing network and maybe even an existing book of business that you need to go find and bring them into the organization. Maybe your organization like already understands the market that they serve and things that they're going after. And so like when you get in, it's you own this territory and you go out and you're doing networking and cold calling and all of those things. So what's interesting is when I first came into this industry, I was like, there's hunters and there's farmers. Farmers are like the ones where the companies got inbound and they got to close. They got to close the things that are coming in. Then you've got hunters that are proactively going out. The education that I've gotten from my team over the last year and a half has been like, hey, there's hunters. There's also like 6 different types of hunters, and it all depends upon the systems and processes that the company has in
Mm.
place.
That I appreciate you saying that because I there's a simplification side behind this, which is there's a hunter and a farmer, right? And the hunter is the one who's actively trying to get new business that doesn't exist, while the farmer is more taking inbound leads and kind of processing a very, very warm lead, so to speak. And I know that's really simplified, and I recognize that when I made that comment, right? And even taking it into two different parts. But I think they say that the top salespeople typically, they're a very small percentage of the people within the business, but will generally create 93% of the sales, right?
Yep.
They are the game changers, right, in a business. And I find the most fascinating thing is when a CEO gets jealous when they've got a comp plan that's paying their top hunters more, the same, perhaps even more than them from a salary and bonus commissions type structure. And then they get jealous and then they do the worst thing, which is they now create target compensation and they cap their income,
Yep.
right? And because these hunters are, why they call them this is they like trophies. And part of the trophy is closing a deal. The fun is the hunt, right? And it's fascinating when the buyer doesn't understand this and they don't really, and then all of a sudden they get rid of them. And I experienced this, by the way, in a publicly traded company where we had a bunch of salespeople, but we had a kingpin, and we lost that kingpin. And guess what? Even a publicly traded company's sales went down, right? Because of the
Wow.
loss behind it happens. It's fascinating, this type of stuff. And it was devastating. Like, it was literally a devastating impact of the company. So it was a really fascinating lesson myself and my career to learn that. So, okay, so we understand, we got the hunter. You mentioned there's a different type of hunters. I appreciate that too, because there is. And also the cycle of the company that matters.
Yep.
And now you're going in the recruit side, you're trying to bring somebody in. When you're talking to someone about bringing somebody on, how long do you tell them when you kind of know? How long does it take to know when a new salesperson will really create for you incremental sales that you didn't already have?
Yeah. Some folks may not like this answer. I'll just like forewarn it with that.
Tell
Our
us the
rule of thumb
truth,
is,
Ryan. Tell us the truth.
well, it's because like it happens, and then what we see as sales managers start to like convince themselves of there's this sunk cost fallacy as well. Like we've seen some teams like hold on for years for non-producers, and it's like you got to let it go. But then it's like sunk costs, and they're like, but I invested all this money. 3 months. Like that's what we like to see is 3 months. And that's also why we offer a 6 month guarantee, because even if you're like,
Mm.
I'm going to give them a little bit longer, we do a 6 month guarantee. But generally speaking, within the first 3 months, like you're going to know if that person is going to be a ringer or not.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so thank you. First of all, thank you for sharing that timeline. That's number one. I think the second thing that's kind of interesting with this, that is, um, I've read beforehand that it sometimes takes as long as 12 to 18 months, depending on the sales cycle, to
Mhm.
really know the effectiveness. In 3 years till they get to a top performer. And one of the things you got to be really careful. I'm saying this to everyone, is, Ryan, you know this. I'm saying
Yeah.
this to those who are perhaps might be working with Ryan, or you aren't aware of this, but sometimes salespeople, close your ears if you hear this. Sometimes salespeople take advantage of being a part of growing companies already, and they tend to leave every 2 years. Why are they leaving every 2 years? Because they're taking
Because the
advantage. Yeah, they're
the
taking advantage of the momentum, and they just get the next
yeah.
great job again. And you don't really, 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 really know for sure how great they are.
Yeah. I It's so funny we're having this conversation right now, because I literally had a similar conversation with someone yesterday. And he was like, the number one thing that I look for when I'm bringing a salesperson in, I look at their resume and I see if they're job hunting. He literally said every 2 years. And because that's the cycle that they saw. And the other thing here is it matters what you measure. So for
Mhm.
instance, like when you look at a sales cycle, you're absolutely right. Like some sales cycles are a year long. So they got to go build these relationships. And then it's like a year later, they'll start to see kind of the fruits of their labor. This is why it's so important to make sure that you're measuring the right things. Because yeah, I'll give you a for instance again from and this is just top of mind for me. So I'm going to keep going back to the insurance industry, which is insurance industry generally is a long sales cycle. The way that he was able to get it down to 3 months is because he's looking for booked calls. And
Mm,
so he knows at the end of 12 to 18 months that as long as this person has 2 booked calls each week and they're already on that trajectory at the end of 3 months, he knows they're going to be successful. If they're not booking calls and they're not picking up the phone, even with the long sales cycle, he already knows that they need to have a tough conversation.
yeah, it's good stuff. By people are listening, I hope you're picking up on this because once again, sales is one of the most, once again, important talent parts you have in your company. And talking to someone like Ryan, who understands and has partnered with experienced sales talent people to understand these dynamics. So when you are looking to grow and you do recognize you need humans, not always AI, right, to get your sales behind it, to get a trust decision for somebody to part with their money, right, to buy your product or service, really critical to have these trust relationship type builders, right, that they can do that, help close a deal, and have the ability to go through that process. So now, and well, this might be a little bit more of a general business success question for you, but since your company's relatively new, but how do you measure success when you're doing business today?
Hmm. Interesting. Are you talking about me personally?
I'm going to go there next.
Gotcha. Um, I mean, it depends upon like the stage and the size. I think what's critically important is that a company is growing. Like, and if we are going to get into this personally, like my definition of growth is very different than I'm sure other people's definition of growth. But there's this old adage of like, if you're not growing, you're dying. And so even companies that are like bumping along, but they're stuck at a certain place, like that's actually a problem.
Yeah.
Even if the company's kicking off cash and everything else, like someone is taking market share and it's not you. And so, one of the ways that I look at, and there's this, 10% year over year, whatever it is, um, I would say the business has to be growing unless it's dying.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, good, good. No, I think that's fair enough. And I, um, I think people understand inflation today. There was a period for like a long period of time pre-COVID that like people didn't think inflation existed, and it always did. It was just subtle, and I mean we understood in real estate, but we didn't like see it in eggs, and things like that, or gas, right? And so we just kind of presumed that it didn't exist. But folks, if you aren't making more money each year, you are actually falling behind. And
That's right.
so it's important to grow. Now you don't have to grow 30% a year, even though I prefer that type of growth, right? But I mean,
Yeah.
but if you're growing only 5, you're barely making any more money after tax, right? So you really should be shooting to grow at least 5 to 10% each year to have a healthy, viable business that's generating cash flow that's positive and incremental each year, that's covering even your present day cash, right, around that. So I think this is really good insight. So all right, now we're going to flip it. We're going to hit the personal side because I am curious. You already mentioned one of the things, which is your writing habits of something that you do consistently to help you bring your best. What is something else that you do that's maybe perhaps like that,
Hmm.
that has been a really good habit for you to get through the challenges of, I mean, once again, you're doing multiple things, right? You're a reservist in the Navy, right? You have to go to active duty sometimes. In the cycle that you have, you're running, you're another business now, you're growing and scaling. What do you do? What do you do to how to keep your sanity, to keep your growth, to keep your health, fitness? What is that thing?
It's a challenge. Like that one of the questions I used to get, especially when I was active duty, like it was always, well, how do you do all these things? Like you've got a family. At that time, it was 3 kids. Now it's 4. You've got active duty military. You got these businesses. You got all these different things, and like, how do you do it all? And there's no magical answer to that. Like the reality is, there's only so many hours, and so something is suffering. Like something in my life is kind of always suffering. Um, One of the like key things that has allowed me to continue to kind of break through, we look at it, I look at it as kind of like breaking through ceilings, which is like, and then once I'm through, like now there's a whole nother level up there. And it's like,
Right.
oh, this is a different game. This is possible. And sort of that reinforcement. I would say the most important thing that I've done personally and professionally to help me break through those ceilings is peer groups.
Mhm.
And so there's a variety of peer groups out there. There's Vistage, there's EO, there's YPO, C12. Like there's peer groups everywhere. having a group, and I can even go deeper on that, because I think everybody should have 3 peer groups. That's maybe another conversation. But having people around you that have been there, done that, having similar challenges, sharing on what they're seeing and how they're maneuvering strategy, and then also leveraging their network. So like when I first started,
Mhm.
how did I get a lawyer? I just Googled lawyer and called them, and then found out later it was the worst lawyer I could ever use. And so like there's so many benefits to having a group of peers around you where it's fully vetted vendors if you need somebody. And then it's also therapeutic,
Yeah.
because even if you can't solve that problem as a group, you got it off your chest, and now you can continue on.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's a fair comment. That last comment there. So now how do you measure success in your personal life?
For me it's like it's happiness. Like am I happy? So like if we got into the financial side or the vehicle side, like my things are less about money nowadays. Like what I want is a G650. And the reason I want a G650 is not to take pictures of it and show it to all my friends. It's because like I think that is the absolute definition of freedom. Being able to go where you want to go, when you want to go, how you want to go, with the people you want to go, like that to me is freedom. And so the symbol of freedom to me right now is a G650. um, but really for me it's about happiness. And as fun as some of these stories were, even Hunt to Killer, like growing a consumer product company that has 20 different items in every single episode, and we had probably 120 episodes. You start to think about the inventory management of something like that. You start to think about stuff getting clogged in ports. You start to think about evergreen stuck in the canal. You start to think about tariffs. Like every day there was a fire. From the outside looking in, it was sexy. It was the sexiest. We were in Forbes, we were in Fortune. Like we did those things. On the inside, it's falling apart,
Mhm.
because every time you level up, it takes a whole new competency. Most companies take, if they ever reach 10 million bucks, usually that's like 10 or 20 years, and they're going through it, and they're hiring people, and they're training them. But when a company's going from 0 to 50 million, like you've just blown through probably 5 at least inflection points where a whole new type of talent is needed to get you to that next level. So long winded, like that was a painful experience.
Yeah.
It was a needed experience. But today it's happiness, and I love what I'm doing, which is great.
Ryan, what is one book that you recommend or you regularly recommend or you recommend to the audience?
I got to go with Traction. EOS was a life changer for me. The Entrepreneurial Operating System. It's a book called Traction by Gino Wickman. It's everything. Anybody listening to your podcast already knows the things that are in it, but it's finally something that pulls all of these concepts together into a way that it can be easily defined and easily communicated to the entire organization. There's nothing groundbreaking in Traction, but it completely changed my life.
That's awesome. Good story behind that, and it's good books. Yeah, the whole EOS part is a effective tool to help grow and create some design and process behind what people do for sure. How can people connect and learn more about what you're doing, Ryan?
Yeah, connect on LinkedIn. And sometimes you'll see I have this like protagonist or antagonist. I don't know which one, but I have like certain crap posts that I do on Mondays where I poo poo on the recruiting industry. So, but I love connecting with people there, just as long as you don't mind me getting crapped on at least once a week. That people that don't want to change the industry. But you can find me on LinkedIn, just Ryan E Hogan, and yeah, it's the photo with a ridiculous looking mustache.
Yeah, you got a good one there, by the way. You do look like you were in the Navy for sure, and it's really funny. We were just in Pensacola, Florida, at the air base, and there's a lot of good stashes. That is, it's they're definitely there. If you need to see them, definitely go to some naval base, and you'll see some great stashes. Ryan, hey, thank you so much for being part of the podcast today. This was a lot of fun.
Awesome. Thanks so much for having me. Appreciate it.
Everyone's listening. I hope you've enjoyed this podcast with Ryan Hogan. I mean, incredible stories. This is not your everyday entrepreneur. And I think he provides some great advice for you to consider when running your business. Definitely encourage you to check out following on LinkedIn. And of course, if you have some recruiting needs, especially in the sales side, check out Talent Harbor to get more information on that. As we always like to say on the podcast, wishing you the very best and measuring your success. Have a great day.